This is Beyond the Headlines, the Learning Edition with Dr. Q.
Hi there. Today I come before you super excited, not only because I'm enjoying the beautiful sunset in my home village in the northern KZN, but because we are making a slight shift on the show. You'll realize that we've taken a break for about a month, but now we are back. And the reason why that is because we were trying to reshape ourselves, remold ourselves as beyond the headlines. What we've decided, and which will be a new change, is that we are now branding ourselves as a learning podcast. Everything we do is going to be informed by research. Everything that we do is going to be informed by people that are experts. Those would be people that have actually studied what it is that they're going to be talking about on the show. There's a number of reasons for that, and we are going to unpack those as we continue with this series or with the show. In this episode, we are joined by Paula Quinsee, who is an educator and professional facilitator. She specializes in what we call imago relationship therapy. I didn't know about it, and I can bet you $1 million you also didn't know about it. But we're here, we're going to learn. It is the learning edition after all. And she's written 2 books. First is Embracing Conflict and Embracing No. The second is Engaged Humans. If you want to know more about Paula and the work that she does, check on the description below. Her website is there. Do reach out and enjoy the episode. Paula, before we dive into the deep work that you do around relationships and emotional well-being, I'd love to hear about your journey. Like, what inspired you to dedicate your life to helping people build healthier relationships? And how did your education and training shape that path for you?
Sure, that's a long story, but I'll give you the shortened version. So back in 2006, I was in a relationship that had hit rock bottom, and we were going for therapy, and our therapist referred us to Imago relationship therapy. So we went away on this couples weekend, and I was just blown away at how Imago just helped me make sense and understand how our upbringing shapes and influences who we become, and then how we forge relationships with other people, both romantically and in the professional. And it helped me make so much sense about my upbringing and what I had gone through in terms of my childhood wounding, as we call it in the world of Imago. And so there and then, I wanted to be trained up in this. I made some inquiries and eventually got trained up in Imago relationship therapy and started working with couples initially. At the time, I was in the corporate world, so I have a corporate background. And with the view that one day, when I was tired of corporate, this would be my second career. And I think as we put things out there to the universe conspires to make things happen. So in 2014, an opportunity came up for me to leave corporate and go into this work full time, which I was actually doing on the sidelines. I was working with couples and individuals in the evenings and on the weekends, and I was running workshops and stuff. And I also had then also studied some other certifications. So I'm also a certified life coach and NLP, neuro linguistic programming practitioner, and I'm also a certified PDA, personal development assessment trainer and coach. And at the moment, I'm busy studying neuroscience as well. So I haven't done the formal journey through psychology. It's been through my own personal journey and then wanting to learn more and understand more. And then combining my professional training, my personal experience, as well as my corporate background, where I like to say, I like to play in both spaces. I work with couples and individuals, and I work in organizations, and it's really around human connection and human behavior and bringing the human back into the workplace and the home, because I believe we've lost it.
Interesting. For a moment, you sounded like Paulo Coelho there when you were talking about the universe conspiring to help you achieve what you want. uh, oh, man, Santiago is the best. Uh, uh, Why do you think this work is important? Why must we have people that are particularly doing the work that you do?
I think because we live in a world that is always busy and always on. We do. We're caught up in this hamster wheel of having to do everything and be everything that we've forgotten how to be as human beings. We've lost touch with ourselves. We've become
Mm.
disconnected associated with ourselves. We've become disconnected in our personal lives, in our relationships, which is why families are dysfunctional and the divorce rate is so high, and communities have become disengaged. And in the workplace, the stats and the data show that 65% of the workforce is disengaged. And I believe that's why we need to come back to being human again, because the neuroscience shows that we not only survive, but we also thrive in community, in relation with others, feed off each
Yeah,
other's energy. We're influenced by each other, and we either celebrate and thrive, and we're in a positive space with each other, or we're in a negative space and a toxic space
yeah.
by with each other.
Mm. And it's so interesting that you've done all these qualifications and courses, in particular the life coach one, the life coaching certificate. And I'm just sitting here wondering how that influences your day-to-day work. Especially
So
when people, especially when people come to you presenting problems around relationships, do you end up being a coach to them? What's your approach?
yeah, so it depends on the context and the environment, but there are times where I do have to be conscious of taking my coach hat off, and that I'm not here to be the coach. I'm either here to listen or hold the space, or there's a different objective to the meeting, or why this person is showing up, and
Yeah,
what am I able. So yeah, and sometimes it's not my role and it's not my place to coach a person. I can't impose my values or my beliefs or my work onto other people without them being a willing participant.
okay, okay, makes sense. So, I'm very much interested in hearing your views around the concept narcissism, and I'm sure you hear that term quite a lot in your practice on a daily basis, even I would argue. But perhaps we could start by defining the term. What actually constitutes narcissistic behavior in a relationship, and how can someone tell the difference between a toxic trait and a personality disorder?
Yeah, so narcissism and narcissistic behavior has been thrown about more often these days than in the past. It's also a term that we are more familiar with than the other term, which is gaslighting.
Yeah,
Um, we see it playing out in the workplace. So, toxic or narcissistic behavior in the workplace would be bullying, using your position of power to coerce, manipulation, having a hidden agenda, uh, trying to get the upper hand on someone, or making life so difficult for an employee or a service provider that you eventually work them out the system because it has a negative impact on that person. The same in your personal relationships or your romantic relationships. It's a partner that is manipulative, controlling, dismissive, breaks you down, and tries to control what you can and can't do. And so, to be clear, we all have narcissistic traits, and we all show up in situations where we can portray these narcissistic traits. But
mm,
to be certain, or to called a narcissist, you have to be clinically diagnosed as a
mm,
narcissist. So we
yes.
do throw the word around randomly, but not everybody is a narcissist.
Again, that's very uh, interesting for me. I listened to or used to listen to Dr. Ramani. I think you would be familiar with her. I used to listen to Dr. Ramani quite a lot. And As I kept listening to her, it occurred to me, you know what? I think we actually have narcissistic traits. Everybody, in fact, it's not um a full. You don't get a full package. Each one of us has traits of being narcissists. Now, in the context of relationships, though, I would love to know because the only time, or most of the times, where you would hear people complaining about others being narcissists would be in relationships. So I'd love to hear, and based on your observations and experiences, what would you say are some of the red flags in early relationships that people often ignore or minimize when they deal with narcissistic tendencies? Maybe you could even contextualize this within the work context as well.
So if we're talking about a romantic relationship, some of the typical red flags to look out for if the first sign would be love bombing. So the partner comes in, it's a new relationship, and they are um, kind of showering you with gifts and compliments, being there and lifting you up and praising you, and it's very intense. It goes from zero to hero very quickly. It's like too much, too soon, too quickly, and they do that to win you and to actually get you to sort of buy into who they are as a person. They are this romantic, loving, kind, caring person. They do everything for me. They shower me with gifts, compliments, and all of those kind of things, so they can gain your trust. And once they've got your trust, then slowly the behavior starts turning. Things that they did like or that they were okay with before now all of a sudden starts becoming an issue or a problem. Some examples would be clothing. You could wear that, but now all of a sudden they have a problem with you wearing that. Or you could go to these places, but now they don't want you to go to these places. Or these did say they liked, and now all of a sudden they don't like them. So the behavior starts changing, and the sort of agenda behind that is over time they slowly start wanting to isolate you away from your support structures and to get you to have complete control over you. And they will swing from one day or one moment they'll be charming and kind and generous, and the next moment it's like a switch flicks and they will turn and become the opposite. And so it's this emotional roller coaster of highs and lows where from one minute to the next everything's good, and then this toxic behavior where they try and break you down and they look at attacking your self-esteem, your self-worth, your self-confidence to a point where you become completely reliant and dependent on them, which is why they try and isolate you from your support structure. I'm talking extreme cases, obviously variations of this, right? And the whole agenda here is for them to get complete control over you and to manipulate you. And the same plays out in the workplace, but just is slightly different. As I said, signs of toxic behavior would be bullying, it would be manipulation and using positions of power or authority. It would be microaggressions. So microaggressions would be things like facial expressions. So someone is talking to you, kind of you roll your eyes at them, and you just like come dismissive behavior. Someone is talking to you and you turn away from them and you walk away from them, or you take credit for their work. And when somebody raises something, you kind of downplay it and dismiss it and go, "Oh, I never said that," or "Oh no, you're over exaggerating." So it's this constant sort of undermining that happens, or gaslighting, as we call it.
Yeah.
So it can.
And that's where I wanted to go. Most of the people that we often say are narcissistic are people that are very, very good gaslighters. So uh, uh, you would experience all the things that you've just mentioned, but then a person would gaslight you into making you believe that the reason why I disapprove of these clothes is because of this and this and this. And they would make you feel like it is your fault, and because you love them, you would be like, okay, I guess I need to change my wardrobe. How do you step out of that? Because I would assume once you're captured and you're in love with a person, it's not as easy for you to escape that circle.
Definitely not. And that's why, when it comes to abusive relationships, and I'm talking across the gender, because it happens from both sides here. You get narcissistic relationships, or in fact, same sex, across the gender spectrum. And because your self esteem and self worth and self confidence has been broken down to that point, it takes a long time for someone to leave an abusive relationship.
Mm.
It's not going to happen overnight, and potentially, if they do leave, there is a big potential to relapse and for them into this toxic environment. So it's a process to first of all understand that this behavior is not healthy behavior. And so, first of all, in terms of recognizing what is unhealthy or toxic behavior, and then secondly, in terms of your own rebuilding your own sense of worth and your own sense of self, so that you can make decisions for yourself. You can put down very clear boundaries and communicate what you willing to or not willing to accept or tolerate in terms of acceptable and unacceptable behavior.
Mm.
And it's particularly in a romantic relationship, are equal partners when it comes to the relationship. One is not better than the other. And this is irrespective of income and financial capacity contribution to the relationship. But first of all, as human beings, we are equal partners and we contribute equally to the relationship when it comes to mental and emotional contribution, because we have the same capacity that we can bring to the table.
Uh, I guess what is sometimes difficult in these toxic dynamics is to differentiate between your emotional manipulation and normal conflict. So I wonder how you would respond to that. How can I then, if I find myself in such a situation, differentiate between what is normal conflict and emotional manipulation?
So normal conflict would be where a couple is willing to sit down and sit in an uncomfortable space, because conflict is uncomfortable. Right? We're not taught how to deal with conflict, so we tend to avoid it. But this is where couples need to learn communication skills and how to resolve conflict in a way that is a win-win, right? So a win-win means both parties are heard, both parties feel that they are validated in terms of their emotions and their reality because it is real for them. And both parties are willing to take ownership of their contribution or their role in the situation. And they are willing to find a way forward, even if that means changing their behavior, because they understand the impact of their actions. They value their partner, they value the relationship, and they want to make it improve it and get a different outcome going forward, because there's a level of respect, care, concern, and love involved. A toxic or a narcissistic situation would be very dismissive. It would be downplaying the intensity or the impact of the situation. It would be potentially blaming the other person and that they deserve this or they've brought this upon themselves. There would be no accountability or ownership or responsibility for anything, and no sort of willingness to own any role or make any solutions or put any solutions on the table as to how do we find a way forward that is healthy for both of us to benefit and for our relationship to benefit.
Mm. And now in the work context, how do you deal with this? Because you do find uh, bosses, line managers that are somewhat toxic or broken in some way, and then they pour it down on their subordinates. What's the easiest way of stepping out of that situation without resigning?
So it depends on the organization and what systems and structures they have internally. So if you have tried to speak to this line manager directly and it's had no impact, or you have found that there's no way forward, I would then look at how you bring in a third person to mediate a conversation. So it could be another sort of manager, person of equal authority, to come in and mediate. Alternatively, to um, then look at escalating it to your HR in terms of following your HR processes and policies internally, and trying everything to the best of your ability to resolve the situation. Unfortunately, if the environment, the organization, and the systems and structures in place don't support that, you may then be left with that option where, to save your own mental and emotional well-being, you may need to remove yourself from that relationship. In other words, find another job and another environment, just as you would if you were looking to exit a unhealthy personal relationship and remove yourself from that abusive behavior.
I wish it was as easy. I'm just thinking about our work situation, our employment situation in South Africa. It's not as easy for one to hop from one place to another these days. But I suppose because there are institutions or organizations generally that don't uh, support people when they come with such complaints, they don't make any provisions. I guess the easiest way would be to step out, and that's one way of I guess I'm gonna refer to this as a step towards one's emotional safety. But then in the relationship context now, what would be the first step towards your emotional safety or my emotional safety? And suppose the other party is not willing to go for therapy or any session of this nature, then what happens?
Yeah. So look, at the end of the day, there's two aspects to this. First of all, you as an individual have an accountability and responsibility to yourself to take care of your well-being. Because if you are not well, you cannot bring your full self to the table, whether it's in a relationship or in the workplace. So you have an accountability and responsibility to yourself for your own well-being. From an organization or an employer's point of view, they have a responsibility to create an environment that supports well-being in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
And so, if your organization isn't upholding those responsibilities and providing support structures, same as in your romantic relationship, if your partner is not willing to go for therapy, you need to take ownership for your own well-being and take yourself off for therapy or for coaching or somewhere, a role model, a mentor, somebody that can help you in an unbiased way, put perspective to what you're going through and what you're experiencing and what your options are, what you are choosing to do about it. So yes, in the workplace context, there aren't a lot of jobs available out there that we can just walk into. So while you are trying to find something else and put an exit strategy in place, what tools and support structures can you equip yourself with to help you survive in the environment for as long as you need to until you can find something else, right? So surrounding yourself with positive support structures, so family, friends, role models, equipping yourself with tools, so wellness tools, mindfulness tools, participating in other things that bring you joy to detract from focusing on all the negative all the time. So sports, hobbies, activities, nature, those kind of things that helps you take care of your own mental well-being so that you can thrive to the best of your ability in that environment until you can find yourself in a different environment.
Uh, you're making me think of this other friend of mine. He just started a new job last week. 2 months ago, he started a new job. A year ago, he started a new job. And these are very, very good positions. So whenever a situation starts getting toxic, he just puts an end to that and he starts a new job. I wonder what the dangers of that are, if there are any. Would you advise for one to do that? Because it's one way of protecting your emotions. I call it emotional safety. Is
Yeah.
that the right way to approach situations?
There's mixed views on this at the moment. In the past, you would have been probably labeled as a job hopper and
Yeah.
would have been seen as not being reliant, dependable, or stable from an employer perspective. And that could potentially also impact your career trajectory. because every time you jump, you kind of, take a step down where you've got to start all over again and start building your career path in terms of progression upwards in your career into, more senior positions, gaining more experience, those kind of things. Whereas in today's world, I think there is more of an understanding that, people don't want to be in toxic environments and people will leave toxic environments. And if, so it's becoming more recognizable. But when there's a pattern there, like surely not every job and every company you go to is a toxic one. So I would also want to explore and go, what is your role in contributing to this? So not all conflict is toxic conflict. Conflict is a given. We're going to experience conflict every day in our personal lives and in the professional world. So are you just going through it or are you growing? Right? Change is there. And change or difficult times is where we build critical skills like resilience, like perseverance, like determination, communication skills, conflict management skills. So I would want to look at the type of conflict and go, is it really toxic environment? Is it really affecting just you or is it everybody? If it's just you, you're the common denominator here. So I would want to take a look at my own contribution and go, what can I learn from these instances? What can I learn and how can I grow and evolve to deal better with situations like this than potentially just run away from them? And I'm not saying that that's what this person is doing, but personal reflection is one of our greatest gifts and tools that we can learn from.
I find that to be a very, very powerful thing to say. I say this because so many of us are very quick to jump into the extremes. And then we forget that in the rec space, there's always going to be conflict. In the context of relationship, there's always going to be conflict. And we mistaken that for narcissism in relationships. At work, we mistaken it for abuse. And so I wonder, uh, how then do we strike a balance, or how do we clearly define what conflict is, and you've given us narcissism. I would love to know, especially in the rec context, because that's where we experience a lot of differences with those that we work with, especially those that we report to.
Yeah. So conflict is as simple as you and I have a different view of opinion.
Hmm.
You and I have different perspectives. Conflict can be as simple as that, and conflict can be loud and volatile and aggressive, right? So I think we've made conflict out to be this big, ugly monster in the room, which we all tend to avoid because we're not taught how to deal with conflict from a very young age. In fact, the first 7 years of a child's life is where our emotional foundation is formed. That is where we learn to deal with emotions, where we learn to deal with conflict, trust, affection, attention, safety, or energy, all of those things, right?
Yeah.
So we learn relationship skills from our primary caregivers, which in most instances is mother and father, depending on the environment that you grew up in. But whoever had a primary dominant influence in your upbringing, male and or female, we take on those positive and negative traits. That shapes and influences who we become. So we all have positive and negative traits. So that's simply opposites. Happy, sad, laughing, crying. We all have positive and negative traits. But our childhood wounding determines how we modify and adapt our behavior to survive and keep ourselves safe. And so that determines our conflict management style. So in the world of imago relationship therapy, these two key conflict management styles, a minimizer and a maximizer. A minimizer is a person that avoids conflict. They're like a tortoise. When a tortoise is threatened, it shuts down and goes into its shell to keep itself safe. A maximizer, like a lion or a tiger, when they're feeling threatened, they come out and attack the enemy to kill themselves and keep themselves safe. Both are doing the same thing, but from a different perspective. One is shutting down and withdrawing to keep itself safe. One is coming out attacking to keep itself safe. And generally, that cliche in relationships, particularly romantic ones, opposites attract. You will find a minimizer and a maximizer in a relationship because that's where our childhood wounding has happened and we identify with that. So the best thing that a couple can do is learn communication skills and conflict management skills to help each other feel safe in that uncomfortable space, that we can have those awkward and difficult conversations and find a way forward, a solution going forward. So conflict is always going to be there between two people.
And wherever there's human beings involved, there's always just going to be this. But then you talk about the minimizer and the maximizer conflict types or conflict handlers. I don't know what the term is, but can't one be a minimizer and be a maximizer at the same time? I say this because you find people that tend to withdraw in times of conflict. They withdraw and they keep to themselves. But when pushed to the limit, they then start punching harder than anybody could ever punch.
Yeah. So yes, you can portray both, but more you will default to the one more often than the other, and that becomes your conflict style. So the minimizer will shut down and withdraw as long as the maximizer is coming at and attacking, right? The minute the maximizer gets tired because there's no response from the minimizer, they will turn around and go and put their energy elsewhere. And then the minimizer will come out because there isn't this intensity and this aggression. So then they will come out and they will now start trying to engage with the maximizer.
Okay. I suppose emotional intelligence is very important in all of this. I hear people nowadays, they not only talk about emotional intelligence, but there's other forms of intelligence. But staying with this one that I'm familiar with, I would love to know what role emotional intelligence plays in navigating a relationship, whether at work or with a partner. If you are dealing with somebody that lacks empathy and accountability.
Yeah. So emotional intelligence plays a key role in our personal relationships and our professional relationships. EQ, as we call it, emotional quotient, is all the internal work that you do to create self-awareness, to be self-aware of what are your triggers, what is your baggage, how are you responding, how are you showing up, and where are you at in terms of your frame of mind and your emotional state. So how tuned in are you to who you are and what is driving your reactivity, your response to a situation, right? And then S, social quotient, or social, is how do I use this information outwards to the people that I'm interacting with every day, personally or how am I allowing those people to impact me by how they are showing up? So in your romantic relationships, let's say your partner comes home, they've had a bad day at work, and they kick the dog and they all of those kind of things, and they take it out on you, right? You have a choice based on your emotional intelligence to retaliate and react to that, or to contain your reactivity and go, seems like you've had a bad day. You know what? I'm going to give you some peace, some distance for like half an hour or so for you to calm down, collect yourself, and then we can engage again. Because you cannot control someone else. You can only control your own reactivity and your own state. So that's where EQ is so important. And the same is in the workplace. How are you showing up and how are you co-creating the engagement, either one-on-one with your leader or a colleague, or collectively as a team and as an organization? How are you showing up in that space and impacting others, and how are you allowing others to impact you?
I wish you hadn't made that example about a dog. My mind is still stuck there because I own a dog and I love my Boston Terrier. You touch my dog, you are out. I don't care who you are. So that relationship for me would be gone. It would end on the spot. But I I guess sometimes is it possible for people to actually change you, Paula? Is it possible for colleagues to change the kind of a person you are uh, to a point where now you become the one who is problematic and you have uh, a bit of these narcissistic traits that or toxic traits that you've been mentioning? What's the likelihood of that happening?
Definitely. So the more that you are exposed to a toxic environment, personally or professionally, it can change your nature and your personality. So you could lose your sense of self and your sense of identity, which can impact your confidence and your self-esteem and your self-worth. And you can become so numb because you just keep suppressing, or your way of surviving is suppressing your emotions and your wants and your needs. And that's potentially because you have tried voicing your needs, you've tried expressing your concerns, you've tried to find a resolution and a way forward, and it just hasn't resulted in anything. And so your way of surviving is you shut down and withdraw, and you can become a mere shell of yourself. Your self esteem, your self worth, your self confidence can disappear. All the joy in life can disappear for you. And the risk there is that you can then err on the side of suicidal thoughts and depression.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I've actually seen that playing out in some organization where somebody was not treated well, and interestingly, they were in a the psychology division of the department, and they were dealing with a lot, and they resorted to committing suicide at home. So I've seen that playing out, and I can attest to what you're saying. But then I guess what I would like to know now is how can then a person use conscious communication skills with either a partner or colleagues who consistently deflect or gaslight whenever they're trying to express themselves?
Yeah. Yeah, and that is a challenge, because first of all, you need to first of all decide for yourself what behavior is acceptable and unacceptable in terms of what you will tolerate. Okay,
Yeah.
and then clearly communicate that. So, I could say, every time I try and share my thoughts with you or my emotions and what's going on for me, you dismiss me and you make me feel like I'm small and like my experience isn't worth your time and your attention. So clearly expressing your behavior, so what you do and how it makes me feel. And then what I would like instead or next is I'd really like to be able to sit down and have this conversation with you and for you to be really genuinely interested in what's going on in my life. And that, if you've clearly communicated that, that leaves the person with a choice that they can either choose to change their behavior and show up in a way that is constructive and affirming and building, or they can choose to carry on behaving in the way that they do. If they choose to carry on with that, this is where you have the choice to put down very strong boundaries. So the strong boundary is every time I try and share something with you and you dismiss me, I'm not going to engage in a conversation with you until we can sit down and have a proper face-to-face conversation. And until you can acknowledge that, my reality is real for me. It's what I'm going through and it's what I'm experiencing. And if they're not willing to respect those boundaries, that's where you have a choice to then go, what value is this relationship bringing to my life? How is it contributing to my well-being in a positive way or a non-positive way? And what am I choosing? Why am I choosing to stay in this space if there is nothing positive, if it's not adding any? What is it about me? And that's where I need to go and do some work on myself as to why am I allowing this behavior? Why am I putting myself in this situation? What is it about my own self-worth and self-belief and self-value that I believe I deserve to be treated like this.
Yeah. You're making me think. I'm just creating a scenario in my head where, let's say, for instance, you've got an intimate partner and they are insecure and they treat you some type of way, and you set those boundaries and you make it known that I'm not going to accept this because it's hurting me. And then, because the person has a louder voice, they then convince you that, look, if you love me as you claim you do, uh, this is something you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to deal with, or you're going to have to find a way of working around. I'm like this because of my past traumas. It doesn't necessarily mean that I love you any less, but I'm still trying to deal with it myself, because there are people that are aware that they are broken, but then they use that to their advantage. Now, as somebody who is loving and very compassionate, uh, you obviously don't want to leave this person. But then, how do you deal with that? Especially when they say, I am aware that this is what is happening, but I don't necessarily think that going for help is going to be a solution.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to say that's a cop out. That's an excuse, right? Um, that's just the easy way out for you to avoid doing the hard work, which is
Yeah.
looking at your own behavior. If you are serious about somebody and you really care and love this person the way that you say you do, you should be willing to take ownership for your contribution, because all you're doing is you're stunting your own growth. Okay, you're actually protecting your ego at the end of the day.
You mentioned the term self worth. And I would like to know how one can then rebuild their self worth after enduring emotional abuse or some form of manipulation.
Yeah, and that's a journey. It's a healing journey that a person has to embark on, right? Is first of all recognizing that how that person made you feel and what they projected on you wasn't necessarily your stuff, it's their stuff, right?
Yeah,
Um, how can you look at how you allowed this to happen? So, how could you look at your role in co creating this situation? So, either you didn't speak up, you didn't speak out, you didn't voice your concerns, you didn't know what your values were and what your boundaries were, those kind of things. So, really reflecting and re looking at how did I contribute to this and how do I ensure that this doesn't happen again going forward, right?
yeah,
And being clear on redefining who you are as an individual, the kind of lifestyle that you aspire to and subscribe to, and that in your next relationship, you're looking for someone that aspires to similar, so that you can very quickly spot the red flags when they start coming up. And that this time round, you can raise those concerns very soon, early on in the relationship, and address them then down the line when they've gone so deep down the line. And then
mm,
surrounding yourself with support structures, so family, friends, and professionals, whether it's a therapist or a counselor or a coach or a role model, people that you can lean into when you are having moments of doubts or insecurities, that you can bounce off and that they can kind of hold the mirror up for you and reflect back to you what you're going through and help you process what you're going through in terms of, is it valid or is it perceived? Because it's perception versus reality, right? And
yeah.
then in activities that bring you joy to rebuild your confidence and bring joy back into your life again, to help you
Mhm.
find that balance.
Okay, no, thanks for that. We talk a lot about toxic relationships, but we don't talk about healthy ones. So I would love to know, and I don't know if you've thought of this, but what would you say are some of the healthy relationship behaviors that people should look out for, especially after they leave a toxic relationship?
Hmm. So someone that is willing to take ownership and responsibility for their actions, someone that is honest and transparent, because that helps to build trust. someone that is communicative, someone that is willing to sit in that uncomfortable space and resolve conflict together. So it's not you and me and the problem, it's us against the problem. We're in this together. Offering that support and that reliability and that dependability when it comes to being able to lean into each other when you need to, or lean on each other. To not only celebrate the good times together, but to also be there going through the tough times together as well, because that's what a relationship is. It's a partnership. And you both skill sets to the table and different perspectives to the table. And instead of seeing that as a trying to outwin each other or to play against each other, how do we take those things and win at life together?
But then I suppose with the examples you just provided now, those are things you learn over time, maybe 6 months, 7 months down the line. Yeah, I just wonder how one can protect oneself within a short space of time. What is it that I could easily identify and say, this is a sign of a good person for me, or this one is a red flag completely?
Pay attention to how people behave, because actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
So when you're going out with someone in the early stages of dating, or even if it's friends or colleagues or whatever, pay attention to how they behave, how they treat other people. So, for example, in a restaurant, how do they treat the waiters or waitresses, the cashier, those kind of things. How do they speak to their parents or their family, their siblings? The friends that they have surrounding them, are they a positive influence or a negative influence? Because that will tell you a lot about that person's value system.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So look at those person's behavior, because that'll tell you a lot.
Okay. And then maybe for someone who is listening and watching this, but feels trapped in a toxic relationship right now, what's one empowering truth you'd want them to hear?
That you don't deserve to be treated in that way. Everybody deserves a level of respect, and everybody deserves to be treated equal. And if your partner is not willing to work with you and to co-create healthy interaction and connection and safety in your relationship, you need to relook at the relationship and the value it's bringing to your life.
Wow, that's very sweet. And last question. If there is one myth about toxic relationships you wish people would stop believing, if there is any, what would it be?
I guess it would be what we've already kind of touched on in just, this is who I am. It's not who you are, it's a choice. Abusive,
Wow.
we are not born abusers. We learn how to become abusive. It's a learned behavior. So just as you would learn to become a smoker and you want to stop smoking and you have to unlearn that habit, it's the same thing. You've learned to be abusive because of the environment that you've been exposed to, or the messages that you've taken on board that's making you behave this way, and you have a choice to unlearn those behaviors and to behave differently.
I suppose the unlearning process is one that is difficult for most people. And I wonder how one gets past the stage of convincing the self to say, now this is what I need to unlearn. Because that's where it starts. And I feel like a lot of people get stuck at that point where they have to convince themselves that I actually need to unlearn this. In a relationship or at work, it's not about Kunisani. It's a collective effort. The other person's interests matter just as much as Kunisani's. I wonder at what point or what it would take for a person to go past that stage where they They say I need to start unlearning some of the things that I've learned over the years.
There would be a few contributing factors. So the one would be taking stock of your life and going, am I truly happy with where I'm at in my life? If I look at the people in my life, if I look at the life that I've aspired to and what have I actually achieved or not, and am I proud of those things and those accomplishments? Look at the
Yeah,
people, that I have in my life and how are they adding value to my life. But people will only truly change a situation when the pain of staying far outweighs the pain or the fear of leaving or the
yeah.
fear of.
Well, Paula, I think this has been an amazing and fruitful conversation. I truly, truly thank you for being a friend of the BTH, that's Beyond the Headlines. This is the Learning Edition, and I think whoever gets to watch and listen to this would gain quite a lot. I know I have just sitting here. And maybe as a concluding remark, if you could just indicate how our listeners could possibly make contact with you if they want your services. Um,
Yeah, so thank you. It's been great being here. And you can find me on all the platforms. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, or X as it's now called. So you can search for Paula Quinsee, or my company is Engaged Humans.
Thank you very much. We will, when we drop the episode, put your website details so that people could easily make reference to that if they want to reach out to you. Thank you very
Wonderful.
much. We appreciate this.
Thank you.